India's diplomatic push with China, a necessity for peace and economic stability. The recent diplomatic engagements between India and China have intensified since Prime Minister Narendra Modi began his third term in office on June 9. However, tensions between the two countries have simmered since China's surprise military incursion between April and May 2020, which led the China to occupying 1,000 square kilometers of territory previously under India's control along the line of actual control, that is LAC. While diplomatic efforts never ceased since then, the tone of recent interactions suggests a shift toward more conciliatory approach. The protagonists in this diplomatic struggle are India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and China, under the leadership of Xi Jinping. The military and diplomatic establishments of both nations have been actively engaged in negotiations to ease tensions. The prospect of one-on-one meeting between Modi and Xi, speculated to take place on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit in Kazan, Russia, has further raised hopes for some degree of normalization. The primary reason behind India's pursuit of peace is rooted in the stark economic and military disparity between the two nations. China's economy dwarfs India's with a GDP of 4.7 times larger and a defense budget nearly 3 times the size of India's. Given these staggering figures, India recognizes that it cannot afford a military confrontation at this juncture. Any conflict could have disastrous consequences for India's military standing and economic growth. By 2047, India's economy is projected to reach $21 trillion, but until then, peace is essential to avoid setbacks and preserve economic momentum. China's initial strategy seemed to involve coercing India into accepting the new status quo along the LAC by framing its territorial moves as the reclamation of its 1959 claim line. However, years of border confrontation have shown diminishing returns for China. Its efforts to shape India's international behavior through military pressure have driven India closer to Western powers, particularly the United States. Furthermore, China faces a potential strategic deadlock on the border unless it resorts to limited military action, something that carries high risk and uncertain outcomes, especially after Russia's struggle in Ukraine. Normalizing relation with China is not just a strategic or military imperative for India, it is an economic necessity. Modi's push for peace reflects the recognition that conflict prevention will buy India the time it needs to strengthen its economic and military capabilities. On the other side, China too seems to recognize the diminishing return of the confrontational approach and the risk of alienating a power regional player like India. With global tension high, whether in Ukraine, Taiwan, or the South China Sea, India's effort to restore a balance with China will likely have far-reaching implications not only for both countries but for the broader international order.